Welcome to the 10-Minute Treasurer. My name is Jeff Pospisil, and I'm also recording this as the treasurer for the Global Methodist Church. And this is such an exciting season for the Global Methodist denomination, as there are so many wonderful churches and pastors joining. But one of the things that we're running into is that churches, they'll join and they're used to being very, very faithful. And that includes being very faithful in their financial commitments. And so that's what I want to cover. I want to cover apportionments, but we don't say the A word anymore. We say connectional funding. So connectional funding and also the money related to benefits. And I'm going to unveil a spreadsheet that'll hopefully help people. I'm going to start with connectional funding. And by the way, I'm mainly trying to talk to church financial people because we're going to get into the weeds a little bit. So just keep that in mind if you're watching this. So connectional funding, what is that? That's the portion that churches give to the work of the denomination, whether that's a global part or maybe it's in our region, so the conference. And here's the basic formula. It's a percentage of last year's operating income, a percentage of last year's operating income. So let's go ahead and look at what is operating income. So in defining operating income, I'm going to borrow from our sister denomination, the United Methodist Church, because they have it well defined. And many of our people are familiar with their statistical tables. So if you are, they had a report where you reported your income and it was called Table 3. And I'll put a link to this in the description. But basically, it walked you through all the different ways that income comes to support the budget or the general fund. And the main way is through the offering plate, which is these first three lines. So any giving that's through the offering plate that is with no strings attached. The next one is if there's interest and dividends. Again, it's unrestricted and it's going right to the general fund. And this one's kind of a rare one, but if you sell an asset of a church, so let's say you sell a copier and that goes into the general fund, that would be something you could include. Building use fees or rentals or lease payments that you receive, that again, they go towards the general fund. So it's a stream of revenue for your church. And then the one that's probably the more common one too is a fundraiser for, again, the operating budget. So it's for the general fund. So what I see oftentimes is maybe a church will have a turkey dinner. I don't know if that's a Dakota's thing, but they'll do a turkey dinner. And so you take the net income from that fundraiser and include that as operating income. And that's anyway how you define it. So what you would do, and here's my spreadsheet, and this is going to be linked in the description, is you would plug those numbers in there. So we're looking at last year's numbers. So we'd take our offering, and all these ones that are yellow, those are the ones that you can actually change. And the ones that are not yellow, you're going to get an error message. You can actually turn that off, by the way. If you go to review, you can unprotect this, and then you can change anything. So, but let's just say we were looking at last year's budget report or statement of activities or whatever you want to call it. And we had $100,000 in offering. That's unrestricted. We maybe had $100 of interest and nothing for a sale of a church asset, and maybe nothing for the building use and rental fees. And maybe we had a really good turkey dinner and it brought in a net amount of $10,000. So overall, our operating income for the church, $110,100. So here's our connectional funding. For the general church, so this is the global part, it's just 1%. So that's all it is. That's, you can't change, and this stays the same for everybody. So if your church is part of a conference that's already organized, the conference percentage will be different from conference to conference. So you might see 3%, you might see 1%, you might see 0%. I think I saw one. But anyway, it's different from conference to conference. And that determines also, by the way, if you're part of an organized conference, it determines how it's paid as well. So if you're not part of an organized conference, it is 1%. And then the 1% for the general church and the 1% of the conference goes to Fredericksburg. But if you are part of an organized conference, the general church part still goes to Fredericksburg, but then the conferences piece goes to wherever your conference says it goes to. So that'll hopefully help. I'm going to give a link also to the remittance form for the general church piece as well. All right, now we're going to shift over to the pastor's benefits. And this is going to be a little bit detailed. I want to go kind of deep into it because I want to hopefully equip you enough that if you are the person running payroll or you're doing the tax reporting, that it'll at least answer most of your questions. All right, now we're into the next section, and it's the pastor benefits section. And the focus of this whole section here is what is the cost to the church? What is the cost to the church? And you're probably going to need your pastor if you're going to fill this out, but it would be what you're going to actually put in your budget. So if your pastor is not on health insurance, there's no cost to the church. Same way, if they're not on retirement or they're not on death and disability, there's no cost. That's one of the values I think that we have, is that you pay for what you get. We don't try to bill some churches more and some churches less to try to help churches out. If you want to help a church, cut them a check. I'm not going to force people to subsidize other churches. But I like the idea of, first of all, I want to see churches prosper, but I'd rather see churches helping other churches than us trying to develop some kind of formula to try to make everything fair. So health insurance, if you don't have a pastor on health insurance, then it's nothing. If it's just the pastor on health insurance, it's about $10,000. If it's a pastor and one other person in the family, so a spouse or a child, $19,000. If there's pastor plus 2 or more people, it's $26,000. And then normally, I think if your pastor is half-time or more, they're most likely, unless they're retired, in the retirement. And I think if they're in the retirement, they're also in the death and disability, but I'm not for sure. So I have a question mark there. So the death and disability isn't a large amount. So if that's included, and it shouldn't totally blow up your budget. So what you do though, is if your pastor is covered, you go ahead and put in their salary, and I'm just going to put in $50,000. And again, if they're not covered, you switch to no, and that just turns everything to zero. But if they are, then you have to decide, do they live in a parsonage? And if it's a yes, then you have to ask the pastor what percentage of their salary are they putting in. And it's actually their planned compensation. So I'm going to turn this to yes. And it moves to $6,250. So basically, the church automatically contributes 5% of the pastor's compensation, which is the salary adjusted for housing. And then they'll match up to another 5%. So a total of 10% is the maximum that a church would end up contributing towards the pastor's retirement. So it will not go higher than that. So if I change this to 10% or 10%, then that didn't change. But if I go to 0%, you're going to see, it cuts in half. 2%, again, it's less than the 5% piece. So that's how that works. So this just gave you all the numbers you need for your budget. So you have the church's, the health insurance part for the church, death and disability, as well as the retirement piece. Now we're going to get into it where we're getting more into the payroll side of things. So if you're concerned, like if you're the pastor or the pastor's spouse, and you're concerned about the payroll, or you're the person cutting the check or filing the taxes, this is what you need to pay attention to. So all this information, there's a quick description on how to get it. So you're going to need, again, your pastor's help. And I'm going to go back to the website. So you're going to have them go to westpath.org, and then there's this benefits access, and they click on that. And if they were United Methodist, they'll be able to use their same account. So I'm going to be able to use my same account. Otherwise, they have to do that new user registration. And this is assuming all the registration has gone through. And they're going to send me a text message to make sure I am. It's very secure. And okay, there we go. I entered that in. So what you're going to want to do then is And I don't know if you should be seeing all my stuff, but I guess I trust you to not, I don't know what you would do with it. Anyway, I guess you'd know how much I put away for retirement. Um, Click on health details. So you scroll down and go to health details, or you could click on health. Either way, I think it gets you to the same one. And then you need to go to plan details. So that's over here, right on this side here. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to steer me out of this website. So it's Benefit Solver is now where I'm at. And what I want to do is I want to click right here on this one right here, Benefits Summary. And I'm going to kind of scroll fast, but now let me see if I can do this. I'm going to put this on one side and then my spreadsheet on the other side. Because what you're going to want to do, this number, the premium credit, already comes in. That's dependent on the type of coverage. So you can see that'll change. All right, I'm going to put it back on family because I'm on family coverage. So you need the total premium. So if you scroll near the bottom here, there's a total premium line. So I'm just going to plug that in. And then you have your HSA, employee, and employer contribution. And these are the annual amounts. So that's right here. So $67.50. I try to pretty much max that out. And then if there's anything for the healthcare flexible spending or the dependent care, you plug that in. And that gives you all the information you need for that piece. So I'm going to make this big again. And then there is a way that a pastor can have federal income tax and state income tax withheld. It's probably not that common. Normally, pastors do quarterly estimated payments, but I'll put a link in there for how a pastor can fill out their W-4 to have that done. And it's no extra work if you already have a lay employee. So I'm just going to say $300 per paycheck. So that's a per paycheck amount. And South Dakota doesn't have any state income tax, so I'm going to put a 0 there. Designated housing exclusion. I forgot to mention this, by the way. If you clicked no parsonage, it'll ask you if you provide a cash housing allowance. So this is extra cash that your church decides to pay in lieu of a parsonage. So the $50,000 salary plus another $15,000, so a total of $65,000 given to the pastor. But $15,000 of it is already designated for housing. And now if the pastor wants to designate more, so maybe they estimate that maybe $20,000 is what they're going to spend on housing. That'd be that 15 plus the 5 is $20,000 for housing, but you're still only paying the $65,000. So just to let you know, this is just a tax. I don't know about a tax loophole or a tax strategy or whatever you want to call it. And then the next thing we need from this section is that part that they contributed for their retirement, assuming that they did make a contribution, is it before tax, after tax, or Roth? Because it affects the taxes. Most people do the before tax one. And then the last question we have is, are they paid semi-monthly, which is the most common? A lot of times it's the 15th and then the last day of the month. Or is it monthly, bi-weekly, or weekly? So that ends up being our options there. And once you fill that out, that should give you a complete picture of how to pay the pastor, as well as their benefits and billings, and how to do the tax reporting. So if you're just doing manual payroll, so you're just going to cut a check, it's $1,271.42. And you could verify my formulas, by the way. They're right up here. But if you actually want to set them up, and I'm going to put a link to my setting up a pastor in QuickBooks video, but it can be a little bit challenging because you have some annual amounts, and you have here's a per paycheck amount, and this is an annual amount, and these are monthly amounts, and this is another annual amount. And then how to figure out your pastor's premium, their share of the premium, is actually to take this total premium and subtracting off the premium credit. And then that represents your pastor's share of the premium. All right. And then here is your monthly billing. So this is the total amount for health insurance. So that's not only is that the premium, the 1/12 of this, it's also the monthly amount for then the HSA contribution and any health care or dependent care. Your pension bill, that'll include both the pastor's and the church's share. The quarterly, this death and disability bill just comes quarterly. Most churches, I think they remit monthly. I may be wrong on that, but I think most of them do it monthly to the IRS. So I just give the monthly amount there. And then usually it's quarterly for state income taxes. And then for your Form 941. And if you only have a pastor, I don't think you have to do this quarterly. I think you can just do it annually. But here is and if you only have a pastor and they're not having anything withheld. So this time I'm having something withheld. So this is the wages from the pastor. So you would add that to any other lay employees, as well as the taxes withheld for the pastor. And again, you would add that to any other federal income tax withheld from other employees. This would be your pastor's W-2 form. So this is their wages after all the deductions. This is their income tax. And you see these are all annual numbers. So this would change if you had let's say your pastor started July 1, all these would be pretty much half. This is dependent care. This one is that before tax contribution. So watch when I switch that to Roth, because this one is Roth. And Roth is after tax. So that's why all these numbers also adjusted. So I'm going to go ahead and switch that back though. And then this last one is the HSA amount, and that includes both the employer and employee part. All right. And one last thing I want to talk about is where to send the payments to. And I'm going to say, yes, you can send it to Reynoldsburg. You don't send it to Fredericksburg. You can send a check there. I highly encourage you to use the link on the invoice. So when you get an invoice, I'm going to see if I can pull it up. Here's a fake invoice. But anyway, there's a link here. And when you go to that, it'll bring you to this portal. Let me see if I can get there. Right here. So it's this portal here. And so they're going to ask for the name on the invoice. So in my case, this is made out to the pastor. We might change that up so it goes to the church. That would probably be more ideal. But anyway, right now it goes to the pastor. The zip code, the invoice number, the due date, and the amount. And then I haven't done this all the way, so I assume that you hit next and it'll verify things and hopefully everything goes smooth. So, but also make sure you wait for the invoice before you pay it. I know sometimes we like to jump the gun. We've been withholding things and we want to make sure it's remitted in time, but it just makes everything go so much quicker if you wait for that actual invoice and then you send the payment. And make sure if you send a check, you write the invoice number on there, or if you send or do it online, and it'll save you a stamp and a check. All right, that brings us to the end, and I hope this was a help for you. You know, really part of my heart has always been, can I make finances and administration a support for our mission and our ministry instead of a distraction? Because, you know, the most important work is that we're seeing people go to heaven and set free from the bondages of sin through faith in Jesus Christ. And if we're focusing on trying to get our payroll right instead of getting the good news out, that's not good for anybody. So anyway, that's what I'm hoping I'm doing here, and just looking forward to serving with you, and God bless till next time.